spending countless overnight shifts at various places. The gas station experiences haunt me the most. There's something eerie about being the only person awake for miles. You let people in without thinking twice. These 3 tales come from folks who've worked those late-night shifts. I've changed some names and a few details, but the essence of each story is real. Or at least as real as it feels at 3 in the morning. And this story takes us back to 2014, when I was just 22. I was pulling the overnight shift at a gas station off Interstate 80 in Nebraska. It was one of those truck stop joints with 24 pumps, a diner that closed at midnight, and a convenience store that was always open. My shift kicked off at 10 p.m. and wrapped up at 6 a.m. From midnight until the morning cashier arrived, I was all alone. The manager assured me it was fine. We had cameras and a panic button, but honestly, nobody ever pressed that panic button. The first few weeks were pretty dull. I'd stock up on cigarettes, clean the coffee machines, and watch the occasional trucker swing by for energy drinks and beef jerky. I got used to the silence, maybe too used to it. That's when I started noticing the car. It was a dark blue sedan, probably a late 90s model. Nothing remarkable about it. But every Wednesday at 1 a.m., like clockwork, it would pull into the lot. The same car, the same time, and out would step the same man. He was tall, around 6'4", with a lean build and a face that always seemed to slip my mind as soon as he left. Dressed in a black jacket and jeans, he didn't wear a hat or glasses, just a blank expression. He'd stroll into the store, grab a small black coffee, no sugar, and pay with exact change. Then he'd hang out by the soda fountain for a bit, not actually drinking anything, just gazing out the window at the pumps. After about 15 minutes, he'd take off, always leaving his coffee half finished. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it. Some folks are just a little odd. I'd seen stranger things. Like that one guy who tried to pay with a bag of loose change that had a live bullet mixed in. Or the woman who came in barefoot asking if we had goat milk. So, a quiet guy with a coffee shouldn't be a big deal. But something felt off. I can't quite put my finger on it. It was the way he never looked at me. Not even once. He'd stroll past the register, grab his coffee, pay, and stand there with his back to me. Like I didn't even exist. This routine went on for 3 weeks. Every Wednesday, 1 a.m., blue sedan, black coffee, 15 minutes. Then he was gone. On the 4th Wednesday, I decided to say something to him. Not in a confrontational way, just a casual, hey, you must work nights too kind of vibe. Just to make him feel a bit more human. So when he came to the register, I asked, rough week? He didn't say a word. Just placed the coins on the counter. 3 quarters, 2 dimes, a nickel. Exact change. I remember staring at his hand. Long fingers, clean nails, no wedding ring. Sir? I called out. He looked up, and for the first time, our eyes locked. His were a pale blue, almost gray, and eerily still, like the eyes of a doll. He held my gaze for a few seconds before turning away and heading to the soda fountain. I didn't say anything more. Deep down, I sensed something was off, but my mind kept urging me to brush it aside. So, I did just that. Another week rolled by, and Wednesday arrived once more. It was 1 in the morning, and this time, there was no blue sedan in sight. I thought maybe he had switched shifts, or perhaps he had moved on. Maybe he was even gone for good. Honestly, I didn't care. I just felt a wave of relief wash over me. Then I decided to check the security footage. We had 4 cameras, 1 at the register, 1 aimed at the fuel pumps, 1 at the front door, and 1 covering the parking lot. Around 2 a.m., boredom set in, so I figured I'd scroll back to see if I had missed anything. I told myself I just wanted to confirm the coffee machine had been refilled on time. I pulled up the footage from the parking lot camera at 1 a.m. There it was, the blue sedan pulling in at 12:58 a.m. and parking in its usual spot. The man stepped out and walked toward the store. Then things got strange. He walked through the front door on one camera, which was normal, but when I switched to the register camera, he was nowhere to be found. I watched the timestamp tick by, 1 minute, then 2. Finally, the front door camera showed him leaving at 1:14 a.m., getting back into his car and driving off. But on the register camera, not a trace. I rewound it 3 times, and the timestamps matched perfectly. I could see myself standing at the register, looking at something, but there was nothing there, just empty space where he should have been. I thought maybe the camera was acting up. It happened sometimes with the old system. I convinced myself that was the reason and tried to push through the rest of my shift. Last Wednesday, I really didn't feel like going to work. I almost called in sick, but the bills don't pay themselves, so I dragged myself in. It was 10 p.m., and the same old routine kicked in. Then at 12:58 a.m., I noticed a blue sedan pull into the lot. I watched as the driver got out, walked to the door, and came inside. This time, I didn't look away. I kept my gaze fixed on him as he strolled past the register. He headed straight for the coffee machine, poured himself a cup, no sugar, and then made his way to the soda fountain, standing there, staring out the window. I picked up my phone, pretending to text someone, but really, I was watching his reflection in the cooler glass behind me. He wasn't drinking or moving. He just stood there completely still, fixated on the gas pumps. Then he turned around. He walked toward the register but didn't stop. Instead, he passed right by me, slipped behind the counter, and pushed open the door to the back office, the one that needed a key code, a code only employees knew. I froze. I could hear him shuffling around back there, papers rustling, a drawer opening, then silence. My hand instinctively reached for the panic button under the register, but I didn't press it. I still wonder why. Why didn't I just hit it? Instead, I pulled out a box cutter from my pocket and approached the office door, which was slightly ajar. I nudged it open with my foot and peeked inside. The room was empty. The filing cabinet stood open, but nothing seemed to be missing. The desk chair was out of place, and on the computer monitor, which had been off when I started my shift, there was a Word document with a single bold sentence. "You don't remember me, but I remember you." I stepped out of the office. The store was deserted. The blue sedan was gone, and I never saw that man again. But sometimes, on those quiet Wednesdays when I drive past a gas station at 1 in the morning, I can't help but think back to that night. I wonder if he's inside, just standing by the soda fountain, waiting for someone to notice him. I quit that job 2 weeks later. The manager said I was paranoid. Maybe I am, but I still have a screenshot of that security footage somewhere, the one where I'm talking to nobody. The next story comes from someone who had a job quite similar to mine, but her gas station wasn't located off a highway. It was right in the heart of the city, and what she experienced didn't get caught on camera. It unfolded in the parking lot. Back in 2019, I was 24 and living in Phoenix, Arizona. I worked the overnight shift at a gas station near the airport. It wasn't a truck stop, just a small place with 6 pumps, a cramped convenience store, and a lot of homeless folks trying to find a spot to sleep behind the dumpsters. The manager told me to ignore them unless they caused trouble, which most didn't. They just wanted a place to rest. The worst part of that job wasn't the customers. It was the boredom. From 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., hardly anyone came in. I'd stand behind the register, watching planes take off in the distance, counting the minutes until sunrise. I even talked to myself just to hear a voice. One night in July, around 3 in the morning, a woman walked in. She looked young, maybe in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She wore a white sundress and flip-flops, and she didn't have a purse or a phone. Her feet were dirty, like she'd been walking for hours. She headed straight to the register and asked for a bottle of water. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. I grabbed one from the cooler, and she handed me a crumpled $5 bill. After I gave her change, she stood there for a moment, staring at the floor. "You okay?" I asked. She looked up, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. "I need to use your phone," she said. "Mine died. I need to call my boyfriend." We had a landline behind the counter for emergencies. I wasn't supposed to let customers use it, but she looked genuinely scared. There was something about her posture that made me want to help. The way she kept glancing back at the parking lot was unsettling. "Yeah, just a sec," I replied, pulling out my phone and handing it to her. She quickly dialed a number and pressed it to her ear, her expression shifting as she listened intently. After a few moments, she hung up, disappointment etched on her face. "He's not answering. Can I try again?" I nodded, and she attempted 3 more times, each call ending in silence. With every failed attempt, her anxiety grew, her hands trembling slightly. "Do you want me to call someone? A friend? A cab?" I offered, trying to help. She shook her head firmly. "He's on his way. He said he would be here by now." "Who?" I asked, genuinely curious. "My boyfriend. We had a fight, and I just needed some air, so I got out of the car. He drove off, but he promised he'd come back." I felt a bit lost for words. Domestic issues always made me uneasy. I wasn't equipped to handle them. So I simply nodded and told her she could wait inside for as long as she needed. She thanked me and moved to the window by the soda fountain, the same spot where Mike's guy used to hang out. She gazed out at the gas pumps, just like he used to. It struck me as odd, not the staring itself, but the coincidence of it all. About 10 minutes later, a silver Honda Civic rolled into the lot. The woman perked up, her eyes lighting up. "That's him," she said, starting to head for the door. But something felt off. I can't quite put my finger on it. I watched as the car parked at pump 4. The driver stepped out. A tall guy, maybe in his 30s, with short brown hair and a plain white t-shirt. He looked perfectly normal, but he didn't acknowledge her at all. Instead, he walked straight to the pump and began fueling up. The woman halted at the door, not opening it, just standing there, watching him intently. "That's not him," she murmured. "Who is it then?" I asked, trying to understand. She didn't respond. Instead, she retreated from the door, pressing herself against the chip aisle. The man finished fueling, got back in his car, and drove. "I need to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. I'm sorry." Before I could respond, she slipped out the door. I watched her make her way across the parking lot, heading toward the main road. She turned left and vanished behind a motel. I figured that was the last I'd see of her. A strange encounter with a woman in distress. It happens. But then, about an hour later, around 4 a.m, a police car rolled up to the gas pumps. 2 officers stepped out and came inside. They asked if I'd seen a woman in a white sundress. I nodded. They wanted to know when I'd seen her, and I told them it was about an hour ago. They exchanged glances. "What's going on?" I asked, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. One of the officers, a woman with weary eyes, explained that they'd received a report. A man had called 911, claiming his girlfriend had run off after a fight near the airport. He described her as wearing a white sundress and flip-flops, saying he'd been searching for her for hours. "That's the woman I saw," I said, my heart racing. "Is she okay?" The officer hesitated, her expression grave. Ma'am, the man who called. He's been waiting at his apartment for 3 hours. He never went to the airport. He hasn't left his building. His car is still parked in his garage. I was confused. Then who was driving the silver Honda? Neither officer replied. They asked to see my security footage. I pulled up the camera from the parking lot at 3 a.m. The woman entered at 3:02 and left at 3:14. The silver Honda arrived at 3:12, parked, and a man got out. He filled up his tank and drove off at 3:16. But when the officer zoomed in on the man's face, the footage was oddly blurry. Not pixelated, just smudged, like his features were obscured. And the car's license plate, completely unreadable. Not dirty, just gone. A blank white rectangle where the number should have been. They took a copy of the footage and left. I never heard from them again. I still think about that woman. What was she escaping? Sometimes I can't help but wonder if she ever made it home. Or if she's still out there, wandering down some shadowy road, glancing over her shoulder at a car that isn't really there. A few months after I first shared stories like this, I got one from a guy in Ohio. He mentioned he'd never told anyone before. He claimed he didn't believe in ghosts or demons, but still, he checks his back seat every time he hops in his car. This all went down when I was 19. It was 2010, and I was working at a gas station in rural Ohio. You know, the kind of place where the nearest house is a couple of miles away, and the only light comes from the flickering fluorescent tubes above the pumps. This station had been around since the 80s. Old pumps, old registers, just old everything. The owner, Harold, was this elderly guy who never came in after dark. He said his eyesight wasn't great, but I think he just didn't like being out there at night. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., Thursday through Monday. After midnight, I was the only one on duty. Harold told me I could lock the doors if I felt uneasy, but that would mean losing business, and I really needed those hours. Most nights were pretty uneventful. A few cars would roll in, mostly locals who knew me by name. I'd wave, pump their gas if they wanted, and then go back to watching static on the store's ancient. The driver's door of the truck was still shut tight, and the window was rolled up. I stepped outside, and I could feel the chill in the air, definitely colder than what you'd expect for October. My breath came out in little puffs of fog. I made my way over to pump 7 and glanced at the display. It was ticking away, the gallons rising, and the dollar amount climbing higher. I turned my attention back to the truck. The engine was off, and there were no lights glowing inside. I rapped on the driver's window. Silence. I knocked a bit harder. Hey, sir, you need to turn off the pump if you're not using it. Still nothing. I gave the door handle a try. It turned easily. The door was unlocked. I pulled it open, and what I found inside sent a chill down my spine. The truck was completely empty. No driver, no passenger, no bags, not even a scrap of trash, just an empty seat and a steering wheel. I peeked into the back. The camper shell was dark, but it was just as bare. Only cold metal greeted me. I let the handle go and took a step back. The pump continued to run, so I hit the emergency shutoff on the side of the machine. The display went dark and the hose fell silent. I stood there for a full minute, just listening. The only sounds were the wind rustling and my own heartbeat. Then I heard something coming from inside the store. A drawer opening. I dashed back inside. The register was open, not broken or forced, just ajar. The cash drawer was pulled all the way out, completely empty. All the bills, all the coins, everything from the night's sales, gone. A couple $100, just like that. But the door was still locked. I had locked it when I stepped outside. I always did. Harold drilled that into me. Lock the door every time you leave the counter, even if it's just for a second. I glanced at the security camera. We only had one, perched in the corner, aimed right at the register. I pulled up the footage from the last 5 minutes. It showed me leaving the store at 2:03 a.m., the door clicking shut behind me. Then at 2:04 a.m., the register drawer opened all drawers. The footage was eerie. No one was there, no shadows, no strange distortions, just cash floating out of the register. I tried calling Harold, but he didn't pick up. So I called the police. They rolled in around 3 a.m., took my statement, and watched the video. The officer, Deputy Miller, shrugged it off as a glitch or maybe a thief with an incredible disguise. "Do you really believe that?" I asked him. He didn't respond, just scribbled in his notebook and told me to lock up for the night. I sat in my car until dawn, too rattled to go back inside. When Harold finally showed up at 7, I handed him my keys and quit. He tried to convince me to stay, saying I was overreacting and that weird things happen with old equipment. But it wasn't the equipment. It was the truck. The empty truck that drove itself to Pump 7, the door that opened on its own, and the money that vanished into thin air. I drove by that gas station a few years later. It was abandoned, the pump's gone, the building boarded up. Someone had spray painted a message on the front door. I stopped to read it. Still pumping. I got back in my car and didn't look back. I still can't explain what happened that night. I've come up with 100 theories. Magnetism, a prank, maybe just a dream. But I know what I saw, and I know what I didn't see. There was no one in that truck, and there was no one in that store. But something opened that register. Since then, I've had a lot of jobs. Office work, warehouse shifts. Nothing overnight, nothing alone. I don't think I could handle it again. Once you've seen how a gas station feels at 3 in the morning, how it can be both empty and full at the same time, you start to lose trust in the silence. You begin to notice the little sounds. The hum of the cooler, the buzz of the lights, the creak of a door that should be locked. And you can't help but wonder who else might be listening.